Ladies and gentlemen, we do have a major situation here today. The Anchorage talks between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. Vladimir Zelensky will not be involved with these talks. It will just be Trump and Putin. And Trump's got Fox News there. They're doing like a whole joint thing. Now there's been reports the Kremlin saying Putin is going to be talking with Trump and Trump's people. You've got J.D. Vance, Rubio, and others, Witkoff. They're all going to be there. It's going to last around 6 to 7 hours, possibly. And apparently, Putin wants to talk about other things outside of the war. But Trump has said the first thing we're discussing, if we're going to talk about business and the United States and Russia possibly coming together on something, there is going to have to be both the countries coming together first on being able to solve the situation with this war. I think from the outside looking in, I'll just try and set the stage on how these talks could go. What do we expect? I mean, this is Alaska. I'm Eastern Standard Time, so I believe Alaska is around 4 hours behind me. Actually, I think it's 5 hours because Hawaii's 4 hours, but it's either 4 or 5 hours. Maybe it depends on the changing of the clocks. But what I'll say on this is I expect three potential things to come out of this. We have to understand, going back the past several months, Trump has already talked with Putin. They've had phone conversations of an hour, hour and a half. Trump has been reporting back to the press and saying the talks are fine, but then after I talk to Putin about something and it goes well and there's healthy conversation, Putin goes ahead and launches a drone strike the next day. And so the question is, well, are we really in a spot in terms of dialogue between the United States and Russia and also Western Europe and Ukraine to where it's one meeting at 6 or 7 hours or it's a weekend and it's solved? Are we really in that spot? It seems unlikely unless there's some serious give from either Russia or from the Western European NATO countries along with Ukraine. Because this is where you could see a difference between the United States and the Western European NATO countries. And honestly, there should be a difference based on geographical location. They're a lot more worried about Russia than the United States is. But the way we look at it is, well, Trump has conceded the idea that, yes, Russia's going to be annexing territory. A few days ago, he said there might be territory swaps. Not exactly sure what that means. I don't know what land of Russia Ukraine would be taking. I don't think there is any land in a type of peace deal that Russia would accept that. I know Ukraine did occupy the Kursk region on the northern border. Maybe that's their negotiating leverage, but it's just such a small plot of land compared to the vast amount of space that Russia has control within eastern Ukraine. It's about 20% of the country, maybe a little bit more than 20% of the country based on their summer offensive that they've had. But even with their summer offensive, it's not like they're rapidly acquiring Ukrainian territory. It's a slow trog. So the question here is, if you are Trump and Putin, you would think based on what Putin has demanded, there could be some agreement on Trump being willing to give up territory in eastern Ukraine to see the war end. Because how does that territory get reacquired by Ukraine? Well, it doesn't, unless there's crazy escalation from the European NATO countries and the United States. And the reason I'm differentiating between the European NATO countries and the United States, because they want different things. It's based off of the threat level of Russia. Those countries are a lot scarier of Russia than we are. I have also heard recent talks of a potential demilitarized zone, which I think has to happen, whether it's an official demilitarized zone or some buffer type thing in between the new border of Russia and Ukraine, if there is annexed territory, which I think there's going to be, and, both of those countries. So there would have to be, I would imagine, some type of buffer. Now, the question is, would Western Europe go for that? Would they continue funding Ukraine? Ukraine is still producing at a pretty high level, even with, the fact that people keep saying, it's like this tagline, they're running out of soldiers. Well, they've been saying that for over a year now. We got to be fair to Ukraine here. They've been fighting. Everyone keeps saying they're running out of soldiers. Well, I mean, people have been using that tag, and at some point they are going to run out of soldiers. If they're, you look at the country and the population and the comparison of armies between Russia and Ukraine. Yes, at some point they will run out of soldiers, but people have been saying that for years at this point. So they are still fighting. Yes, Russia is slowly gaining territory, but it's not at the point to where it's going to be a full takeover or anything like that within the next few weeks. They're probably just around 1/5 of occupation of Ukraine. But the question is, would Ukraine and would Western Europe, because people keep talking about, well, Zelensky this, Zelensky that, Zelensky said he's not giving up any territory, Zelensky said he wants Crimea back. It doesn't really matter what he wants. If Western Europe says, no, we're not funding you anymore, he's pretty much screwed. He has to negotiate. Ukraine only has leverage if Western Europe and the United States are on their side. And it seems like from the offer that Trump gave, he had like a 7-point peace plan. It seemed like there was some agreement. Now, when it comes to what happens to Ukraine in the future, that's going to be a big hang up, I believe. You can give up the parts or the fully Donbass region, but the question is, what happens to Ukraine? Putin apparently wants them to demilitarize, and that's been a big thing. That's been a huge hang-up. Western Europe does not want that. We can understand why, considering they did just invade Ukraine. And so you have to wonder, is there just too many concrete disagreements to come to an immediate peace deal, or can they work together? When it comes to the Trump angle of this, he has threatened major sanctions. None of us want the sanctions to go into place because the sanctions would inevitably affect the price of crude oil, just like they did back in 2022. And in 2022, you can say, well, it's a little bit different. That's when the war was just kicking off. Now it's in a different point. You can kind of justify the crazy sanctions from the West onto Ukraine, which basically barred them from importing into Western countries. And if Trump hits them with sanctions, I think this is just pressure. Trump does this all of time to pressure countries into action. What was the action? Well, it's a meeting between Trump and Putin. How did that happen? In part, I believe, because Trump threatened to heavily tariff a country like India, who buys vast amounts of oil from Russia. And that's one of the ways and the key way where Russia was able to subvert the tariffs from the Western countries, because they sold all of their energy to India and China and other Eastern countries. So the thought is, well, if Trump starts threatening a lot of these Eastern countries, if he tariffs, or not tariffs, if he sanctions the hell out of Russia, and then he threatens Eastern countries with major tariffs if they buy or do trade with Russia, now you're pigeonholing Russia, and that's the action that you're forcing them, and Putin's saying, all right, I think we should meet, because I don't want that to happen. Because he was able to run to the Eastern countries back in 2022 when the United States launched the major sanctions, and the Western European countries did as well. So the question is, if this goes badly, will Trump follow through with heavy sanctions? And what do those sanctions entail? And how long does he keep the sanctions on? Because if he does follow through with sanctions, I would have to think it would only be for a week or two. I mean, Trump's done this with tariffs all the time, where he'll tariff a country 70, 80%, or, with China at a certain point, it was 145%, and then he'll go back on it, and people say, well, it's flip-flopping, it's tacoing is what they call it. But the point of it is, it's what it is, it's a strategy to force action of the other country. It's a pressure strategy. That's why you would threaten Russia or tariff or sanction Russia or tariff China or tariff other trading partners. You want to force action from them, and it creates negotiation is what it does. Trump putting a crazy tariff on a country, he's not doing it because he wants to keep the crazy tariff on the country. He's doing it because he wants negotiation. Trump saying he's going to sanction the hell out of Russia doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be these crazy sanctions. He's doing it to force a meeting like this. I think people misread that, unfortunately, and they're going to continue to, it's a constant thing to where the point of it is it's a negotiation. It's honestly to force negotiation, which is what this is right now. And whether you want to say, well, that's the reason why Putin is meeting, because Trump threatened the Eastern countries with major tariffs if they did trade with Russia, it seems like it's a viable explanation for why the Anchorage talks are happening. So you've also got this, and Trump is going with Fox News. Trump wants good press out of this. So they've got like this whole extravaganza. They've got meetings at like 3 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Eastern. Fox News is covering all of it. He's letting them in, and he wants good press out of this. And so Trump says, you can see what it says here. Trump just proved he's coming from a position of strength ahead of his meeting. Trump says, I think it's going to work out very well. If it doesn't, I'm going to head back home real fast. If it doesn't, you'd walk. Trump says, I would walk. Well, the next question is, would you follow through with the sanctions? I wonder if Brett Baer asked him about that. But Yeah, no, it's certainly the other thing is, would Trump just back off completely, back off the funding of Ukraine if these go badly, and say, you know what, this is a Western Europe, or it's just a Europe problem in general. This is a Europe issue. This is not a NATO country. So you have to think about that as well. Would Trump consider doing that? Which honestly, he's been kind of going in the opposite direction. That's a lot of Trump supporters. They wanted him to completely stay out of it. And originally, it seemed like he was pressuring Putin, and all the Trump people were saying, well, it's Zelensky. He's the problem. This is why it's not happening. They had the meeting. It went really badly. But then Zelensky agreed to a 30-day ceasefire, and Putin wouldn't. And that really changed the relationship dynamic. But there's still a lot of Trump people that don't really want Trump to be involved and are more wishy-washy. And there is a lot of corruption in Ukraine. Even, you're bipartisan, you would admit it. But they are a country that did get invaded by Russia. You can say, well, Russia has previous territorial claims to the land, and we'll get into more nuanced conversation going back to the fall of the Soviet Union, even before that with the Russian Empire, even before that. Or possibly just going back to the local history of the 2014 overthrow and of the pro-Russian government. Which, to me, the big sticking point of this is you can give up, if you're Ukraine, you can give up territory as much as they don't want to. And I understand why they're not going to, why would you say to the public and to the media, oh yeah, we're going to negotiate and we're willing to give up territory? Now look, they can only really negotiate with any leverage if they have NATO behind them. If they don't have NATO behind them, if these European countries, if the United States say we're done, we're sick of it, you need to make a deal, they'd make a deal. But if they still have NATO behind them, they're not going to make a deal. And the question is there's going to be maybe some difference between the United States and the European NATO countries in terms of how they see peace. So the real thing here is, we could go through this and it kind of feels like they're going to say, oh, it's healthy talks. But is anything really going to be solved in this? It feels like they're too far away, unless they can somehow, because to me, it seems like Trump and Putin relatively, if Trump is willing to give up the oblasts, the question is, it's the demilitarization of Ukraine. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one to get through if you're Russia, considering you just invaded Ukraine. Like, how would you expect Ukraine? How would you expect Trump to agree to that? But giving up, you're giving up territory you've already lost. That territory is it's under their government administration, the Oblast, the Donbass region, and then maybe there can be maybe a mineral deal with Russia within the Donbass as well, to try and foster better relations with them. So, there's a lot to this, but the way I see it, it just depends. Is Trump going to differ from these Western European countries? Is he going to differ from Ukraine? Well, he has in the past, and he's acknowledged there's probably going to be territory. He calls them swaps. I don't know what they're swapping. What is Ukraine getting back? They're not going to get back anything. So it's more of a territory annexation. And if I'm Trump, I might try and slip in something, maybe about Greenland. Maybe like, listen, you want to annex this territory, you need to support our operation in Greenland. That's just the way it is. If you want territory, and we'll see maybe if Putin accepts that, but I don't think he's going to do that. Either way, that's basically it. I think Trump and Putin, for certain things, can be on the same page. But the question is, well, if they have positive talks, where does that really leave us? What does that mean? They have positive talks. Because it really comes down to the Western European countries and Ukraine. If Trump and Putin want something, but Western Europe is still funding Ukraine, and you could say, well, the United States can bully the NATO countries into accepting whatever, because right now Zelensky has this ironclad thought of, we're not giving up any land and we want Crimea back, which obviously is not realistic. But I do think there can be some agreements from Trump and Putin on the certain annexed territories within the 4 oblasts, on the recognition of Crimea as being a part of Russia. But there are other things that Russia would demand that I think the United, and maybe that's where there is some there's some give and take. Maybe that's where the pressure comes into Russia, and Russia says, you know what, we don't want to face these major sanctions a second time. This time, possibly without us being able to trade with Eastern countries, because Trump is trying to cut that off. Maybe that's where that wrinkle and that threat comes into play, because I do think it is a threat. I mean, Trump said it was a 50-day window, then he said it was a 10-day window in terms of when the sanctions go into effect. I mean, and what are the sanctions? Are the sanctions going to have more of an effect than they did in 2022? Because the effect that they had in 2022 was a very bad domestic effect for the United States economy because of the price of energy. Do we want to go through that again? Trump's not going to go through that again. I can pretty much guarantee it. So if there are sanctions levied on Russia, they're going to be done in a different way, or even if they are similar sanctions, the sanctions will likely be removed pretty quickly, as they're likely just a pressure tactic. So that's what I would say about that, about the sanctions that could be placed onto Russia if these meetings don't go well. But if Trump says, well, the meetings went well and we made progress, I just don't see, what does that mean? You've had like 5 phone calls with Putin within the last 6 months. We need something out of this that is tangible, that is in cooperation with the Western European NATO countries. There's going to have to be, and there's going to have to be some give, you would think, from Russia as well. And people say, well, Russia has all the leverage. They've got a bigger military than Ukraine, and they do. But what about their asset expenditure on this war relative to the amount of territory they've gained? Nobody really knows what that is. I mean, they could be spending a boatload of money. They're not gaining much territory. There were reports 6 or 7 months ago about Russians, citizens, not happy with the war situation. And I know also I've seen a pretty crazy groundbreaking poll on the citizens of Ukraine saying, we don't care about giving up land. We want the war to stop. That's what they say. They want the war to end. So it's about 75% of them. We'll have to see what happens, guys, but that's the meeting here today that they're going to be having. Make sure you like the video down below. Also, guys, follow me on X. Links to that's always in the description.